Okay, let's start. Everyone here with projects finalized? Topics? I guess, yeah. Okay, great. I'm going to be sending out the form for you to give me the URLs, and if any of you want to talk to me further right after the class is again a good time. Okay, so last time, go ahead.
So the syllabus there's mentions on the GitHub page, is that included with that? Or?
Yeah, so basically the URL you have to provide to me is of your GitHub repository, which will consist eventually of your software data or whatever as well, but it will also include your website. So what GitHub allows is this concept of GitHub pages, which is basically part of your repository, and then you go to a particular URL and you kind of see a nice website. And into the GitHub pages, you can put HTML moved over from your favorite editor or whatever. You can export it from it. I'll include some instructions if you're not familiar, but if you Google for GitHub pages, you will see what I'm talking about, and they have some examples. Okay, so last time we had looked at some of the basics of cryptography, and in particular symmetric cryptography, and we had talked about kind of the different concepts of what does it mean for security. So one was this whole notion of perfect security, which is what one-time pad brought, provided you had sort of the keys, which were basically have to be at least as long as the message itself, and then how to approximate that using these concepts of pseudo-random functions and pseudo-random permutations, of which AES is kind of the standard example. But the idea was that we could use that to essentially mimic one-time pad in a streaming cipher sense, and then also in case of the block cipher, I had shown a few examples on how to use it. And then the other thing we had covered was this whole notion of secure hash functions, or essentially kind of attaching a tag to a message so that if someone tampers with it, you would be able to detect it. And kind of towards the very end, I kind of talked about the complete picture out here really includes both the encryption so that no one can snoop at it, and message authentication code so that no one can tamper it. And the message authentication code relies on the fact that it's very hard to reconstruct the message matching the same signature as before. And then I had talked about there are a few different ways you can combine these two operations. So imagine, so at this stage there are great libraries out there which provide you these two functions, the MAC function and the encryption function, and again standards and stuff like that for it in all your favorite programming languages. They exist, and oftentimes AES is baked into processors and into radios and things like that, so easy access to these things. But still, you can use them correctly or incorrectly, and I've given examples of like what stand for good usage and not. There was a very important role played by that initialization vector. But here it's about in what order should you do the authentication code versus the encryption. So one option simply is that I first come up with the authentication code. So given a message M, I come up with the MAC, the tag along with it, and then we encrypt the whole thing. Second option is we encrypt. So I have a message, I encrypt it using my encryption key, and then I compute authentication code for it. And then final one is that we kind of do that together, encrypt and MAC, kind of a separate pathways. And it turns out, for a variety of reasons, the middle one is actually the most secure of the options, and that's what IPsec uses. So for example, when you sign up for UCLA's VPN, it kind of actually gives you all these both SSL and IPsec as an option, and I guess IPsec is more sort of safe from that regard. Okay, so now what this solves is the problem of I can detect tampering, I can prevent someone from snooping, but what we still haven't done this thing is how do we even get the keys to begin with, and also that shared secret that we rely on, and also how do we know the identity. And that's where public key cryptography comes into play. And the basic idea in public key cryptography is that unlike standard encryption where we have the same key on both sides, here the encryption is done using one key and decryption is done using a different key, and they are kind of linked together to a common generation process. So they're generated in a very specific manner, and one is called public key, the other is called secret key. So public key, private key, or in this case, public key. Okay, and there are different ways you can use this setup. So so there are many applications where it gets used, but we often face with the situation where A and B need to talk to each other in a secure manner. But to talk in a secure manner, they need a shared key, and of course, these could be two random parties, right? They've never met before. So we could do them for a key setup. So SSH, for example, uses public key cryptography for setting up a session key, and then from that point on, the session key kind of gets used. So now you could so one setting is the following. If I want to, let's say, this is normally not how you would use things for big amounts of data, but let's say I want to send you a small message and I don't want anyone to look at it. So in this setting, what happens is Bob sends one to send Alice a message, and so what it will do is Bob will encrypt the message using the public key of Alice, and somehow, so we are kind of pushing the can further down. Somehow we know the public key from Alice. Okay, so it could be that there is a trusted website where you go to and you can look at the public key of every individual. Usually what people do is they put it on their websites and stuff like that, and if in turn the website you trust, then you know what the public key is. So we do need the public key. And the idea is that the only person who can decrypt it is the one who has the secret key, the private key, and that would be Alice. So Alice generates the two key pairs and keeps the secret key, doesn't tell anyone else, super securely on her machine, and then also we have a good reliable way of publishing the public keys, and then we can send these things out. So of course, kind of the okay, what happened here? Okay, so somehow we need to be able to generate such pairs of keys with kind of reliable properties that nothing else other than that one particular secret key would be able to kind of decrypt the message. So the steps in this process really kind of start with that generation of such a public-private key or public-secret key kind of pair. It's also used for encrypted file systems. So imagine I want to store stuff onto a hard drive. So in this particular case, again, what I want. So many different scenarios you can imagine. I want to make sure that you want to send me something, so I can publicize my public key, and you encrypt the hard drive using that, and then you can hand it over to some other party. So encrypted file systems end up using that. I'm going to skip these examples. Okay, so there are many, and we'll see later. This also gets used for signing thing, like I write some piece of code and you want to make sure that the code is indeed coming from me and no one else. So what I can do is you can set it up so that only the person who has the right private key would have been able to sign it, and you verify that using the public key that was public. So you can verify kind of the provenance of it. So there are all these kind of examples. Now there are different ways of achieving this, creating such a public-private key pair, but it relies on a concept called trapdoor functions. So the idea behind trapdoor function is the following. It's a function which goes from some set x to some set y, and it consists of a bunch of very efficient algorithms. So there is some algorithm G which will output a pair of random, some sort of randomized algorithm outputs a pair of keys, pk, sk. Then I have a function f which, given the key pk, it basically maps x to y. So it's a function which takes as one input pk and another input some element from the set x and outputs an element from the set y. So this you can think of it as the encryption function. And then I have an inverse function which, given the secret key sk, goes from y to x. So it's basically inverse. But the main thing is that this function is a one-way function. That is, if sk is unknown, then this f is not invertible. Okay, so it really depends upon this property that only the party who knows sk can come up with an inverse function and not otherwise. So that's why it's called a one-way function on a trapdoor. It can open one way, but the other way requires access to a secret, which presumably is we are able to keep secret. And in this setting, since sk is typically pk sk pair is generated by the entity, so keeping that thing secret is easy because you're never going to share it with anyone. So like for example in SSH, it just goes into that .ssh folder and there are two files there. There is kind of your ID and then id.pub. id.pub is what you send to other parties and ID you keep secret. So as long as no one penetrates your machine, it's a reasonable expectation to have. So to construct any public key crypto system, you basically need to create such kind of a trapdoor function or a one-way function which has this property that without knowing sk, it would be computationally very hard to go kind of the other way. So usually what kind of there are many different ways you can realize it, but kind of the basic idea is you rely on the hardness or believed hardness of certain mathematical operations. In particular, discrete log plays a very important role in this context. So any function which exhibits this property could potentially be used out here. So so we need key generation and we need kind of this trapdoor function. Okay, I'm going to skip. I have unnecessary animations out here. Let's see, I think I can skip this. Okay. So one place where it gets used is for digital signatures. So digital signature basically is for signing a document, so that signing a digital message, so that you can verify that indeed it is coming from the right entity. So let's imagine that we have a public key encryption system in place. Alice publishes the encryption key. Anyone can send therefore the encrypted message to Alice, but only Alice can decrypt it. So that's the standard encryption. In digital signature, what happens is Alice publishes a key for verifying the signatures. So in this case, Alice will publish again kind of the public key, but anyone can check the message that Alice signs. So kind of a typical idea would be that there is something about the message that only Alice could do. So for example, it could be I can take some sort of a hash over the some sort of a summary of the message and then sign it, and then take and then encrypt it, and then the party which decrypts it can match it against the content of the message. So this way only Alice could have generated the signature. So this is how it works. So we have a triplet out here, GS and F inverse. We have some sort of a secure hash function, so it can take a message and convert it into a small digest, so you can use any of our previous methods. And then the idea would be to sign this thing. What Alice will do is it will take the hash of the message, that secure hash. This is going to take a private key and then it's going to sign it, and the signature process will just do that inverse. Okay, and that would be the signature. And then the idea is that you publish the message M, and you publish. The other party can always compute the hash over it, and you publish the signature. And the idea is that no one else can forge the signature because no one knows the SK, but anyone can verify the message, verify the thing by basically computing firstly inverting this using the public key, and then making sure that the H of M matches the hash that you compute in the message. So this is why kind of on GitHub repos and all, you kind of see this is the kind of a long string of numbers, and so you can verify the provenance. So in this case, the idea is that no one can tamper and yet go undetected with this approach. The other thing is that you could also, by making sure that the public key that you're using indeed belongs to Alice, you can also validate that it's the right person. So like for example, let's say when Apple pushes iOS update, then the phone verifies that it's indeed coming from Apple and not from any other third party. So you can hopefully see uses for this and all sort of IoT settings and stuff like that. When the firmware is being pushed, presumably it has to be signed by the manufacturer, who would make sure that the secret key is kind of never released, and then the public key is burned into the devices so that they can kind of validate that the firmware is coming from a valid source, has not been tampered with. And in fact, our modern systems kind of build upon this concept so that all you need is something non-tamperable which is burnt into the device, and everything else you make sure that it is coming from a source you can verify the identity of, and you can verify that the piece of code which is coming in has not been tampered with. The two collectively are sufficient indications of them being able to trust in that, right? So you have three pieces of trust. Number one, that non-tamperability of whatever is literally burnt into the hardware, so usually something in ROM kind of thing. Secondly, of the identity, that is no one else was able to forge key and pretend to be Apple, let's say. And then finally, this whole system works so that no one can tamper a code which was being pushed by Apple. This whole public key crypto system and all, oh, by the way, so the missing piece is kind of this verification, so that's kind of straightforward. So this whole public key kind of stuff, or asymmetric key cryptography, grew out in 70s or so, sort of work at Stanford and all. But interesting tidbit of history here is that the actual invention of this apparently preceded almost by a decade by the defense labs in UK, but it was so secret that essentially it was never announced or released in public until much later. So they were kind of, those people were honored decades later. So this often happens in this case. The invention itself, or the discovery itself, was kept kind of secret. So to make all of this work, as you might imagine, we also need an infrastructure in place so that these public keys could be kind of distributed. So, so knowing the public key reliably is very important. So how do we know a key belongs to a particular individual? And this is where this PKI, or public key infrastructure, that essentially has emerged comes into play. So the key idea out here is that we have to trust something. Okay, I mean, so in this particular case, there is, imagine kind of a root of some form, and that's called the certificate authority. So eventually, why do I think that this person is Bob? Because Bob presents some credentials which are signed by someone else, and eventually kind of we walk up the chain and we basically say, okay, this if Bob is able to present something which through a series of steps I can show is actually signed by someone I know is trustworthy, then I'm working on it. So it's kind of a sequence of certifications that happen. So so this public key infrastructure then depends upon the thing that there is some trustworthy authority who then delegates a other parties, and then they can delegate. But eventually, the key gets signed. So what does this look like? So that's the digital certificate that are kind of encountered in browsers, but is present. So now with something like SSH, we are not when we are solving kind of a different problem with those public key crypto pairs, right? Because we self-generate those keys, and the sole purpose there is to establish a session key. But we do not deal there with the problem that am I contacting the right other party, right? I mean, when we log into whatever some CZEC machine, we kind of just assume that we are going to that trusted machine. But on the other hand, if your device is, let's say, pulling a firmware update, we want to make sure that we are actually going to the right machine itself. And so this PKI helps us solve that problem. Or like, for example, how do I know I'm going to Wells Fargo, or how does Wells Fargo know that it's me? Well, Wells Fargo knows it's me because of the password. But so the other problem is more tricky, which is how do I know I'm actually contacting a Wells Fargo. So digital certificate is yeah, actually I'm glad you brought up. So I guess last Thursday or Friday. So essentially, the crypto methods which were used under the hood to validate the certificates are probably in Windows 10 and apparently in all the older versions. So if you're using Windows, update it. Otherwise, that's the result. So this thing builds upon that PKI infrastructure for it to work essentially. So just last week, Windows 10, to the extent that NSA put out advisory about that, because I guess they could have sat on it and exploited it, but it was kind of a universal weakness, including I guess all the machines that use the results. Okay, so digital certificate is basically a file in which you have the public key as well as other information, right? Okay, so it would say this is money, public key, signed by this, okay, and then perhaps you would have information in there as to who is certifying this, so that you can go one level up the tree. So there are many trusted certificate authorities in the world, and they essentially kind of form this transitive trust. Okay, I trust this party because in turn that's trusted. So because if there were to be a single trusted entity, then there would be a huge scalability problem, right? So you kind of rely on this delegation. But indirectly, eventually, we are kind of going all the way to the root of trust to kind of verify this. Now, of course, problems occur in this thing, right? Because the moment you delegate, then you are also trusting those entities you are delegating to be doing their job properly. So sometimes they create problems. Sometimes in countries where you have firewalls of different types and all, they kind of mess with this thing. Sometimes if you visit a campus and all, they often kind of act as man in the middle and kind of try to issue their own certificates, and then your browser will ask, do you trust it? And those are all examples where it kind of defeats the intent out here. You shouldn't, but sometimes you are left with no choice, because if you are in such a country or such a campus, then in a sense you are letting them snoop on all your traffic and do all sorts of stuff and follow. Now how do we trust these certificate authorities? Well, basically because your software knows about it. Okay, so baked into your browser is a list of what the certificate authorities are. And if ever one of those root certificate authorities, one of these, go bad, then Google, Apple, Microsoft, they will push out an update to remove them from that list. Okay, and it happens. There have been incidences where in some countries or whatever, either break-in happen or whatnot, certificate authority gets compromised, and then sort of bad things happen. So our modern sort of secure communication and a lot of other things, secure file storage and sort of software updates and all, they kind of are based upon the whole process where initially we um, engage in set of messages to make sure that you're talking with the right party, and then we make use of the public key system in order to establish a shared key, and after that we can have an encrypted session. And in other settings like signing software and all, there are similar things which happen. So like if you use if you develop an app for, let's say, Apple using Xcode, then you have a developer key which Apple generates and sort of signs for you, so that a phone will only run apps which are have been signed by Apple. Okay. So all of this machinery kicks in. So you can use this thing not just in a browser setting, but of course anytime you are accessing web services as IoT devices do and all, you will kind of again need something equivalent. So this is an example where an app can talk securely to some cloud service. So digital certificates are basically kind of at the heart of this. Typical information there is as shown here. So it would have URL or the name of the host, name of the company, like service provider, whatnot. What are the validity dates? So certificates are not used for perpetuity, they need to be renewed. Part of it is simply economics. So these companies who are in the business of signing certificates, they need to make money. So there is an annual subscription and whatnot. There are companies now which issue these certificates for free because they're trying to encourage people for using these things. Of course, there is the degree of trust you would place in different kind of certificates would be different. So like when Apple is issued a certificate by whichever company you go to, then of course they would fully verify that it's some legally authorized person from Apple representing Apple who's getting it. Whereas on the other hand, these services where you go and generate the certificate for yourself, they are not doing any such validation, so kind of therefore just receive that. So typically, and then it will be signed by the certificate authority, and then your browser or your app is supposed to kind of validate all of that. But indeed, it is signed and by an authorized certificate authority. So, what we have therefore at this stage is kind of a basic symmetric encryption function. We have asymmetric encryption function. I didn't go into the math behind it, but again, kind of that one-door functions. Basically, like I said, they depend upon the hardness of doing something inverse, and turns out discrete log is a hard function, for example. You may have often heard about that prime number factorization and why that relates to this problem. So what happens basically is the following, that one key would be a product of two large primes, and the other key would be one of the primes. And the idea is that finding the other prime number factorization is a hard problem. So that's finding factoring large numbers is a hard problem. So that's what they go with. So you pick some problems like that. The main thing is the following, that some of these problems are simply believed to be hard, and some of them are easily breakable with a quantum computer. So one of the area of research in recent years has been to create schemes which will work, which will remain hard even if quantum computers were to succeed. So there is a lot of activity around this. AES, on the other hand, is hard P. Okay, but when you hear about that, security or privacy would be at risk and stuff like that, but quantum computing is really largely open to this. And then cryptographic hashing, which I kind of talked about, which is basically this notion that I want to create a hash which is normal way. And we combine all of this to create the ability to sign a document. So when Adobe Acrobat lets you sign digitally sign something, it's basically these kind of things which are coming into play. So, at this stage, this stuff, if executed well and barring quantum computing type stuff, is pretty standard, and sort of some things that sort of good crypto books and all emphasizes that, again, use well written libraries and all instead of doing your own stuff, because the implementation itself can accidentally leak information, and which is not something that you want. The more interesting stuff in recent times really has been happening on kind of the more other use cases around encryption and things like that. So just kind of the goal tends to be out here is that provable security. It's not simply hard, or it seems hard, but it should be kind of mathematically provably hard against an adversary who may have lots of computing power, and yet you want to show that mathematically it would remain quite hard for them. So I presented this this set of slides before also, so the next few slides, but just wanted to reinforce. So at this point, if you simply want to secure data in transit, secure data in storage, you want to set up a key, you want to verify that some server's identity. These are kind of standard primitives at this point. You could start by simply using secure socket, so tunnel through SSH. Those kind of things can be done. So what's been happening really is really looking at these other kind of scenarios, and I kind of talked about this, homomorphic encryption being one, which kind of addresses this problem that I want to outsource computation securely. Okay, so I have some private data, I want to compute it in a cloud service like Amazon, but I don't trust that service fully, in the sense that the problem is not that they are going to not do the job properly, because I can always test for it. I can throw a test thing at it and check whether they give me the correct result or not. The problem that we are after is that they are curious, and therefore I don't want them to get to know the X that I have. And this is so that's one. And the other one is that when we publish encrypted data, we often want granular control over it, right? I may want my Dr. A to see some part of my medical record, Dr. B to see another part, and maybe the billing department on the hospital look at some other aspects. So we want kind of some degree of control. Imagine as if there was a database and I want to publish it, and I want some granular control over who gets to kind of see what. So there are many different ways of chasing solutions to these, but yeah, more animation, so skip it. Okay, so but you can also approach these things from kind of a purely crypto protocol, crypto algorithm perspective, as opposed to hardware. So one concept is this notion of functional encryption, and the idea is I have X, I will publish encrypted X, and I want different parties to decrypt this encrypted X, but get different, almost like different functions of X, okay, or different subfields of X. So, for example, it is a database, and then researcher may get f of X, family member may get g of X. So, how do I kind of do it? I only want to publish one entity. I don't want to publish encrypted f of X and encrypted g of X. I'm just going to publish encrypted X, but then give a key to a researcher such that when a researcher uses the key to decrypt, it will get f of X. I'll give a different key to a family member. When the family member uses a key to decrypt this entity, then it's going to get the g of X, and so on and so forth. So this stuff is called functional encryption, and actually was discovered, invented by Professor Amit Sahai here in CS department. So pretty cool concept, and it's been used for a variety of things. So so essentially, yeah, some more bullets which basically say what I just described. It's been used in a variety of settings, including problems like I want to publish code. I want you to be able to run it, but I want to make sure that you cannot decipher it, right? You know, like oftentimes I want to give a chip design or a software design, and I want you to be able to run it, but I don't want you to be able to reverse engineer it. So usually, the kind of the hackish practice to it is you take your code and then you kind of munge around with addresses and variable names and stuff like that, just kind of make it hard for a human to understand. But none of that gives provable sort of reverse engineering, lack of reverse engineering. With methods like functional engineering, there are ways you can kind of go around doing it. So that's one concept, functional encryption. The other one is homomorphic encryption, which came out of work at IBM for the most part, and Stanford. And this addresses this problem where I have X, I want to compute f of X, but I don't at a remote place, but I don't want to reveal X. And the hardware solution to it nowadays might very well be that I will say, okay, I don't trust the whole machine, but I trust Intel who built the processor in this thing, and therefore I'm going to run it inside the hardware enclave inside it. So, but that's not a complete solution until because I'm still trusting something. I'm still trusting Intel. Maybe I trust Intel more than I trust for the Linux distribution and the box vendor and stuff like that, but I'm still trusting. Could I do it without trusting anyone at all? And that is where homomorphic encryption comes in, which basically I can send, I want to get this effect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send encryption of X over, and this guy, this server, will compute F over encryption of X. Okay, it's the same function, so let's say cosine of X. So then what this will do is it will do cosine of encrypted of X. Okay? And then what I'm getting back is F of, sorry, this is my example, cosine of encrypted X. Except it's for a homomorphic encryption. It turns out that cosine of encrypted X will be the same as encryption of cosine of X. And then I can decrypt it. So that's how kind of it works. Now it sounds simple. There is a lot of like how do we pull this off? So it turns out for the longest while, people knew since 90s, people knew how to do the class of functions where you had additions of variables, but you had multiplication only with constants. Okay, so essentially linear functions, kind of sum of products, constant coefficients. And then around 2010-11, this person named Gentry, that was part of the PhD thesis, like work at IBM, kind of figured out how can we do functions which have variable multiplication also. And with both of these together, you can basically do any computation that you want. So fully homomorphic encryption, how to do it, at least in principle, got done just this past decade. And started out being many order of magnitude more inefficient than the plain text computation, and then over time they have chipped away with it with better algorithms and FPGA hardware and things like that. So now that you probably, for some applications, perhaps you got 2 to 3 order of magnitude different. And the idea is that in a given large application, maybe there is a subset you can still do reasonably with it, and then protect the rest using that. So at this stage, there are open source libraries, and also Microsoft provides this, at least as part of Azure, kind of provides a secure computation service. So homomorphic encryption, as the way I described, kind of plays a very similar role, at least for some applications, as the secure hardware enclave. Okay, in one case you trust Intel, but you get native speed. In another case you don't trust anyone, but you get a slowdown in the process. There are database systems where when you read and write, everything is encrypted on the other side, but you're still able to query it and things like that. So there are all these use cases that have emerged. We at this point kind of doing partially homomorphic stuff is, as I mentioned, reasonably good. Of course, still slower than plain text computation, but good enough for a lot of stuff. And fully homomorphic is also doable. Now there are a lot of catches in this whole story. One is that I'm sending encryption X. This encrypted X is not your AES over X, right? The AES over X, what happens to this is the same. Here, the kind of encryptions that get used result in big bloat in the data type. So you are also paying the penalty in terms of the amount of data you are sending. Another thing is that we know how to do these things over integers and rationals. So if you have real number computation and all, which oftentimes you do for processing sensor data and all, then you have a loss of precision which is coming in. So there are kind of caveats in this whole story, but again, to an extent that you can manage it. So the security comes at a price that is as most good people like do. So this is an example of homomorphic encryption. Third problem, then the same. Yeah, you have a question? Sorry. But what are you? Oh, you're talking about this one. Okay. So, why are we sending it? Yeah, I mean you could do it that way, except that X and Y may be coming from different sources, for example. So oftentimes there's an example where I have a bunch of sensors and I'm trying to compute and aggregate over them. Well, okay, so let's take an example. We want to encrypt, do an aggregation. So there is no place where X and Y are together. So the idea would be each party is individually encrypting, sending it to the No, encryption scheme is in the simple realization they are the same. Okay, same. Okay, so that's going on. The only thing is X and Y are not together. They're two separate places, so you're encrypting. So that's homomorphic. The third kind of exciting situation which you encounter a lot is the so-called secure multi-party computation. And the idea is that there are a bunch of sensors which have some bunch of devices or individuals who have some secret, and I want to compute a function over those secrets. And the idea is that we are all agreed that we want to compute that secret and we all want to know it, but other than whatever is revealed by a function, we will not learn anything else about it. So for example, let's say we are all voting on some issue. I don't want others to know my vote, it's secret, but we want to know for sure that the result of the election was tabulated correctly. Okay? So one way, this is how we currently do things, is we trust someone, right? We send our secret vote to the county and the county calculates out. So one realization of this concept simply would be a trusted intermediary who every party trusts. But could we do it? So this is kind of like whatever the court solution. Okay, but could we do without such a trusted intermediary? Because this trusted intermediary itself could be bribed or whatnot. So don't really want that. So could a bunch of mutual parties with a secret each can collectively compute that function without with all those properties. Right? And if we could, that would be great. And secure multi-party computation protocols essentially do that. So there are also challenges that you can imagine. Main thing is that these things. So firstly, mathematically, there are a lot of connections between the three things I presented: fully homomorphic, homomorphic, functional, and this problem. The other thing is that naively done, this is pretty expensive because there are multiple rounds of communication that take place. Again, so you can achieve some practical approximation to it if you are willing to trust something like an Intel processor or whatever enclave in a processor, but you can also do this thing entirely algorithmically without any trust. That's something to be trust. Nice thing is all of these things at this stage are available in library forms and all for one to use. For different different applications. So the final bit is crypto works when used correctly, and that's a very important thing. Often the various shades of it, but short answer is that use good, well-known, validated implementations because they have been vetted for bugs and implementation issues and forms. But all these different things that I described kind of are available with some trade-offs. Another thing I want to mention is that AES is super efficient. Okay, you can encode, decode hundreds of megabit or even gigabit segments. Public key crypto is super inefficient, which is why we don't use public key crypto on the direct messaging. And in particular, it's really inefficient when you are talking about microcontroller class devices, because the mathematical functions they rely on are compute intensive. So one area of work a lot of people do still, if you kind of go to conferences which are on sort of crypto meets hardware end of things, they are about how to efficiently implement elliptic curve cryptography, which is something which is used as in public key crypto. So how do we do those mathematical functions in a power efficient manner? So lots of work kind of goes on in that space, for example, or homomorphic, how to accelerate that, FPGA solutions, ASICs, how to efficiently do it on a processor. All these kind of things are part of what goes on in this process. So that's a quick right through sort of what exists, what you can take for granted, and of course some of the stuff is kind of still open research. There is a center here at UCLA that Professor Amit Sahai leads, which is kind of focused entirely on all this secure multi-party computation and all these kind of properties, and also that part is still kind of an active area of research, even from theory perspective. Okay, so with that kind of tour through kind of basic crypto as it currently exists. So I wanted to pick something which is more cyber physical in nature, more in tune with what you're asking in this course. So it's a problem that I have mentioned earlier also, and I know some of your projects are kind of dancing around this, but and it's basically a problem called verifiable proximity encryption. So we encountered it when I talked about attacks on cars, where we had this stuff about cars which open and are ready to go moment they detect the key to be near them, and that how that relay kind of an attack can happen over them. So this kind of relates to that, and in many other settings you can imagine sort of proximity and distance information gets used in so many contactless payment, right? I just put my card next to the turnstile. This one, smart door lock, unlock at home. There's some of the smart doors now. You walk to your front door and it unlocks. Okay, usually they rely on some Bluetooth sensor like that. Automatic screen unlock. Okay, on Macs, right? You sort of come in with your phone and it. Any of you use that feature with your phone and Mac, right? How does it work? Any idea? So actually, your Mac and phones have a chip built in for past in recent years, which can measure distance to pretty good accuracy, like sub-centimeter. So and the newer phones now have kind of phone-to-phone type stuff. So like for example, if you have the iPhone 11s, then when you do what is it called, Wi-Fi direct-based file transfer, AirDrop, right? So I can do it so that I can point my phone towards your phone and it will only talk to that. Okay, so it does both distance and kind of direction there. So reliable toll collection is another example, right? I mean, many California tolls are not very common, but in many places the car kind of goes to the toll booth and kind of toll it. any time you have smart card based access to part of a building, and many. Okay, common to all of these is that you're basically relying on some notion of proximity and distance to kind of then give access to a service or doing something. So being able to do this thing reliably is extremely important. And the attacks against these have been kind of that relay attack that I talked about earlier, but basically the idea is that the adversary works in pairs. There is one party which is near the victim or one device, another near the other device, and then these two are able to bypass the standard communication channels. So in my car example, it was simply that even though the car key was far away, this relay essentially let it pretend that the thing was nearby. So as you might imagine, simply looking at, like in this example, simply looking at the signal strength is an awful idea, right? Because the signal strength would certainly work out. Payments can again, someone can put the contactless cards. I can charge my purchase to your card. So kind of these remain kind of valid threats. So essentially, the problem that we want to solve is to prove proximity, that the client is indeed close to the service, and we can define close in some manner on the service. It's an ATM machine. I should be able to prove that I'm within, let's say, 2 feet of it, right? So it depends upon what service it is. Okay. So essentially, what obviously we are doing it is to estimate the physical distance and then say, hey, the physical distance is within some threshold, and then I'm going to let the system go. So one type of approaches out here is to observe the change in some physical property of the signal. So typically the signal is steady, but could be other things like phase of the signal or something, and then get to that, right? So this is a very common way of doing things, and you could even imagine other stuff like checking whether the signals can increase over time, decrease. You can play with that. So that's one. And the other one is to estimate the travel time. Now, the first one, as you can imagine, is not very safe, because radio signals can travel long distances often when you don't want them. So for example, studies have shown that our passports, which have RFIDs in them, occasionally can be picked up by readers which are as much as like 30-40 feet away. On the other hand, oftentimes flip side, when you do want them to talk to readers, they don't work very well. Okay, so but the problem is, from a security perspective, you want to make sure that the worst case would be. So first option, usually not very good. So estimating the time of time or kind of some time related. The challenge out here is that many of these things we are trying to prove things over small distances, and over small distances, the time of flight is, if you are using electromagnetic signals, is going to be pretty short, right? I mean, 3 10 to the power 8 meters per second. So when a room size thing, you have a few nanoseconds to work with at best. So not very desirable. So one approach is, let's say, if I were to say, okay, estimating time of travel is hard, I'm going to use ultrasound signal. In fact, you can get apps for your phone where 2 phones can exchange acoustic messages and measure the distance and do it pretty well. Okay, do you see a problem? I don't need to. I can send the signal the other way, bounces it back. I do a round trip calculation and then provide it. Huh? No. Do you see a security problem? I can encrypt the ultrasound also. I can do signature on ultrasound. I can do all that stuff. Well, the relay attack, right? I mean, the now the adversary has an advantage. They can use RF to relay the signal, and your signal is traversing slowly, right? I mean, so the adversary has a speed advantage. That was the attacker has a speed advantage, right? So you don't want to operate with a slow signal outside, because then the relay attack becomes easier to mount. So you actually do want to do this thing, right? So that you yourself are traveling at the speed of light, so that the adversary cannot. You're making the relay problem difficult, right? Still, you're still not scot-free, but using a slow signal is just giving the adversary more room to mount the relay more easily. Okay, but purely from a distance measurement, these two things currently exist. Under a time umbrella, there are many different ways. One is I send you the signal, we are already time synchronized, we measure, you measure, we get the speed of light. Now that's unfortunately hard, because if we are close enough, then we're talking about nanoseconds. We really don't know how to do nanosecond type time sync. Moreover, there's a practical issue also, which is you imagine I'm the ATM machine, you're a customer. Why would your phone be synchronized with me all the time, right? I mean, so when you come close to me, only then we are trying to work this thing out. So, so the more typical situation would be I'll send you the signal and you're going to bounce it back, and I'm going to measure the time difference. Now, how can I bounce a signal back? Excuse me. So, let's say I give you radios, and let's say, and then I ask you to design distance measurement using those radios. So what would you do? I mean, so firstly, I can send a packet, you get the packet, you retransmit the packet, it comes to me, and I measure a time difference. Okay? What problem do you see out here? What are the confounding things out here? Forget attacker. On this one, I'm just worried about like how would you, like I said, Apple uses time of flight here and all, right? I mean, how are they doing? So what's the source of uncertainty? That there's no single strand, huh? Right, or actually it's the determinism of the computation speed, right? So the other party receives the message, is supposed to bounce it back, but to bounce it back, it will take some delay, and we want that delay to be, even if it's slow, to be super deterministic, right? So that I can subtract super deterministic and known to me, right? Because I want to subtract it out to get a good, right? So now what happens is, because of all this delay, I need to sort of account for it, right? I mean, there is this computation delay and it's non-determinism that we have to kind of factor in. So that's one way, right? This is kind of a computational reflection. I'm sending you the packet, you are going to computationally send the same packet back to me, or whatever, a packet telling me that you have received it back to me, and then I'm going to measure the time difference. Time difference measurement is fine, because I can operate a processor running at a few gigahertz, or maybe have a little FPGA, and so I could probably do measurement of time intervals pretty accurately, right? I can do some hardware assist. But this delay in reflecting kind of creates a problem. So then the question is, can I create a better reflector, right? One where the delay would be very minimal. So like a mirror, right? Light comes, mirror goes back. Yeah, so what happens there? Yeah, right track. So can I reflect back an electromagnetic signal, right? If I could, just like a mirror, can I create a mirror for whatever band I'm operating in, right? Then I could do equivalent to what I'm talking about. The signal comes in, bounces back, and now the delay is basically 0 or close to 0, right? I mean, I could kind of work on that. So we'll see how these things play out, but because any if there is that gap out there, not only it worsens my distance estimate, it actually also gives attackers an opening. Okay, So we'll see how it plays out, but kind of deep down, those are the two methods. So receive signals template. Basically, we take into account, we make use of the fact that the signal strength attenuates with distance. Okay, as electromagnetic waves or sound waves travel, this attenuate. So you could estimate. The only thing is that the world is just way too cluttered, and also it's not. So while we study in physics nice equations talking about how the signal attenuates with distance, in real life is a lot more complicated. There are asymmetries. So, like for example, if I were to transmit a signal from a radio that I'm holding, the signal, and I look at the circle around me, the signal strength at different points in the circle will be vastly different because the world is so highly asymmetric, right? So take into account the bounces of signals and all. So it's not true that in each direction the relationship between distance to signal strength is the same. Moreover, it's not even monotonic. Okay, oftentimes what may happen is that signals may leak through doorways or stuff like that. So it's not as if I'm just walking on a line away from me that the signal strength is necessarily monotonically distributed. All sort of stuff comes into it. But having said that, it's very common to play with thresholds and all to kind of set something. So that's how usually those smart door locks and all operate. And you can imagine right there you have a problem, right? I mean, let's say I have one of those smart door locks which is operating on signal strength, and how does it distinguish between someone inside and someone outside, right? I mean, all those tricky cases also come into play. But that's how these things operate, and there are obviously lots of examples of these products around. Apple has this technology called iBeacons, and usually these things go under the name of micro-locationing. But basically, the idea is that if you are close to an iBeacon, then you get access to some services. Okay, usually let you access additional information on the product and all, but essentially this concept has been used in all these locks and stuff like that as well. Okay, so that, as I said, doesn't really work terribly well, but so to get it to work, for these things to work reliably, probably the best thing you can do is operate them at very low power, so that the signal only goes for a little bit around them, and then you can detect real close proximity. Okay, but getting reliable stuff far away is not very easy. Second class of techniques, which are based on phase. So basic idea is that one entity is going to send out a signal, think of it as sine wave, and then what this guy is going to do is it's going to send it back. And imagine I have this mirror conceptually that I talked about, so literally just send it back somehow, and then the car knows the signal it was sending out, and the car also knows the signal it was sending back. The phase difference between these signals, the theta, will not be a function of distance. Specifically, it will be distance modulo the wavelength, right? So I know the phase difference depends to the wavelength or to the distance. And it turns out that by doing this measurement at a couple of different frequencies, we can then estimate the precise distance. So in math, if you work out easily, but basic thing is theta, d, and lambda are related, and if you make measurement at two different lambda, two different frequencies, then you can solve between the measurement because d remains unchanged. So that's how, for example, some of these distance measurement stuff that you buy, laser measurements and all the kind of operators, they rely on phase. How can I do this bouncing back, right? So what I want to do is, I want to send back this signal, and I'm trying that conceptually out of create a mirror. So I could create a mirror, I could have this signal go back, and the equivalent of a mirror radio signals is basically an antenna with a certain property. So you kind of set you can basically set the antenna parameter so that it will reflect. Okay. You could do that. But the other one, which lots of radios out there do, is the following. They have a local generator of a signal of the same frequency. Okay. And then what it does is, so it transmits that, and now we have the advantage that there is a counter. And then what it does is, it locally adjusts the phase of the signal until the phase of the outgoing and incoming one. Okay, so essentially, I have an oscillator out here, and it is generating a signal of the same frequency as is coming in, and also the same phase. So it gradually adjusts the circuit so that the signal going out is an exact replica in terms of phase and frequency of the signal coming in. That's effectively the reflector. So that's how these things operate, and this is all happening at the analog level. But there are plenty of radios. Excuse me. That exist at it's always on. So it's basically some feed down some analog circuitry which is always on, and I'm doing this. Of course, you have to activate the function, but these are called phase measurement units. And essentially, what they do is they will have a voltage input which you can tune, and you can measure the phase, and they will also have a phase difference. So you basically tweak the voltage there until you see that the incoming signal and outgoing signal are aligned. Yes, probably only some result error, but kind of basic idea is that I have a signal coming in, I'm producing a signal, I have a voltage knob. We are doing it to create a reflection. No, it's nothing to do with time now, right? Because I'm measuring distance by phase. What is happening here is that I'm going to again measure the, so I'm going to use the same hardware, but this time I'm going to measure the difference in phase between the signal I was sending out and the signal I'm getting in. And that phase difference would be more like that. Okay? So I'm getting some information about D, and then I'm repeat the measurement at a different lambda. I have two equations. Two D is constant, so I can completely just forget that. So lots of radios which are used in IoT devices have this hardware built in. Okay, essentially it's a hardware which lets you measure the phase difference between two signals, and a second piece of hardware which lets me phase shift the signal. Okay, and with those two, I can do this thing. So you can usually get centimeter level accuracy using this, and kind of open. So they exist. Final one, which is really kind of the most advanced one, is that I literally just measure the time of flight. So I send the radio signal out. I make sure that this can bounce it back with a known deterministic small delay. I mean 0 comes back. I calculate when I sent it out, when I got it back, so it's like a pulse. I send it pulse, pulse it back, measure the time of flight, divide it by 2, okay. This is where what I have to do is I have to make sure that this turnaround delay, TT, is very tight. Right? Because if TT is large, then what will happen? Okay. So remember, we are worried about relay attack. So why does a large TT make relay attack? Yeah, so basically adversary may have a better technology where it has a shorter TT, right? So best case for me is that TT is close to 0, because then essentially adversary cannot beat my signal, right? I mean, but on the other hand, if TT is large, then adversary gets a lot of laxity and it can help more discomforting. So we want we want low TP. So turnaround delay or processing delay to be as small as possible. And the other thing is that our accuracy also depends upon the granularity of how I'm measuring the time. I'm measuring the time using some clock. If my clock is, let's say, 1 megahertz, then my estimate of this thing is only going to be close to a microsecond. So I want a fast clock to measure this time reliably. So this is where there's a class of radios called ultra-wideband radios. The way they operate it is they spread their signal over a large swath of frequency as historically used. Okay, they are very good at measuring timing very precisely. A lot of work in this happened at neighboring USC. These radios are also used for other purposes because they can measure distance very precisely, and because they send the signal over a large band, they can go through concrete and stuff like that. So like you see them used in like after let's say a disaster, people are buried in the concrete. They can look at beating heart rate. They can measure detect beating heart and all from a mile or two. So in battlefield operations they get used for that. So ultra wideband has been around for maybe 30 years or so. Initially analog, but nowadays they're part of things, and as I said, data types have a really different encryption. Things have come long way. But besides being able to communicate with some desirable properties, for this purpose, they actually allow for very reliable distance estimation because you can measure time very quickly. You still have the issue of turnaround time. You want the turnaround time to be as small as possible, and that usually means keeping things in the analog. Don't even get into getting the package and then decoding the package. Turn around the analog signal. So the latest work in this space with a security group at Zurich, which has been pushing this for a bit. They basically is ultra-wideband, special ultra-wideband chips designed for this particular use case. So now, how do we go around attacking proximity? So one type of attacks which happen are basically making use of the fact that the upper layers of these systems are usually not designed with security in mind. So remember, we are referring to things like car keys and stuff like that. Okay, so they're often not designed, so you can certainly attack at that level, but then also you can attack at the physical level. So the basic problem is the following: attacker can manipulate the measured distance, even if your higher level stuff was protected with cryptography and stuff like that. Right? I mean, even if you were encrypting the package like that, I can mess with the physical property of a signal and thereby give unauthorized access. So that's the basic challenge that occurs that in distance measurement. Unlike keeping content secret, we are able to manipulate and magnifying this is the fact that it's very easy nowadays for people to eavesdrop, modify signals and all using that software-defined technology that I said. At, let's say at $1,000 point, you can do very sophisticated stuff. $100 point, you can do modestly sophisticated stuff, just off from Amazon and Alibaba Express and things like that. So what will the adversary do? So firstly, I would like to say that there are two different kinds of situations. In some cases, location is important, and in other cases, distance is what we are after. So location could be, if I am in this corner of the room, some service would be available, but not if I'm in the other corner of the room, right? So in that case, you are trying, the problem is one of secure location. And the other one is, if I'm near the car will open or not. In that case, it's of secure ranging or secure distance. Okay, so that's one aspect. Now let's focus on distance, right? Because locationing, how do we find location? What's the typical way to find location of something? No, you're giving it what happens in the code. I measure distance to 3 or 4 different things, right? 3 or 4 different satellites, and then apply some mathematical operations and be able to kind of find. So one way you can think about location is the following. I have distance known. I don't know my location, but I know my distance from a bunch of anchors whose location is known. I know I'm D1 away from X1 Y1, I'm D2 away from X2 Y2, I'm D3 away from X2 Y3. And then you can basically think of it as an optimization problem. My unknown is X comma Y, so I'm going to say the distance between X comma Y to X1 Y1 should be as close to D1 as possible, because that's what my sensor is doing. Distance between, again, my unknown X comma Y to X2 Y2 should be as close to D2 as possible, and bit over D3. So I have 3 error terms, one for D1, one for D2, one for D3. I can do a least square error type optimization and come up with mine. So you can basically think of it in that way. So now what can the attacker do to distance? There are 2 cases. The attacker, that's the way attacker can lie. It can attack so that I measure a smaller distance, or it can attack so that the measured distance is larger than reality. So let's think about it. Why would the attacker want to give the system an illusion of a closer distance? Okay, thought. Great. What about, so that's distance reduction. What about distance enhancement? Can you think of a situation where attackers might want to create something by increasing, giving the illusion of a larger distance enhancement? Okay, denial of service is one, right? I mean, it wants to annoy me, and denial of service can then be translated into safety issues and stuff like that, right? I mean, so that then you can think, I mean, other cases that you can kind of come up with for those things. So there is distance reduction and distance enlargement. Now, distance enlargement is easy. The adversary just has to insert it, right? So it can track the signal, play it back after looking for delay. So I just add delay, and therefore in my time of flight based system I can just okay. Distance reduction is where things get more interesting, right? I mean, it's harder to mount. Settings. But you might also want to think about how would you prevent distance enlargement attacks. Okay, so there are both these attacks which are of interest, and both are of interest. So now this distance reduction attack. So essentially you can think of, I have a client which we call as a prover. I have the service provider, which is the verifier, and essentially the service provider will provide the service to the client only if the client can prove that it is close enough to the service. Right? That's our problem. So, you could imagine variety of things and those different technologies that I mentioned. So, for example, let's say it is RSS reducible stent-based. That's very easy to attack, right? Because I can manipulate, I can recalculate the signal with a higher value, lower value, and just phase, again, that's sort of, so amplify and delay and delay, they're kind of both phase-based systems and amplitude-based systems are very easily attacked. So, a lot of prior work showing that these attacks can be done pretty easily. So fundamentally, any locational system which is based on signal strength-based system measurement or phase-based system measurement is very hard to do. So that leaves us with time-based systems. So time of flight based systems. So essentially, what kind of current good systems are based on. And so again, recall kind of the approach there is we send a signal, it's bounced back with a deterministic delay, hopefully 0, and then I measure time of flight. Okay, so the question then becomes the following: that is there a way we can so firstly, how will the attacker attack this, and the other one is how will the how can we protect against it. So remember, the basic idea is I send a signal, you're going to bounce it back, it comes back to me, I want to measure the distance, and your goal is to give me the illusion that you are actually close enough to me so that I can I'll open the file. Excuse me. So one simple situation where attacks become easy is the following: that some of these things were basically using deterministic. Acting up today. Okay, so as an adversary, your goal is to have the signal be received before the real signal would have come, right? Because I want to shorten the distance. So if I can predict the signal, then my job is done, right? So one setting under which I can predict the signal is if the signal is predictable. If the user is always, if it's either using a stupid protocol or if it is what's yet, if it is actually not even bothering to do anything, it just literally sends out a pulse and waits for a pulse. Okay, so in which case, adversary's job is pretty simple. It observes the outgoing pulse and then beats you by sending the adversary, right? So the attack pulse, which is a red pulse. Okay. So essentially, if you leverage the predictable nature of the protocol, then you could treat these, and it turns out that many of these systems have such predictability, very easy to defeat. But really, basically what it means is that you have to make sure that when you are structuring this, the adversary cannot beat you by simply predicting okay, during that period. So so what we need to do that is basically achieve that. There are other ways you can kind of go around attacking these systems by exploiting properties, but essentially you want to create a situation where it is logically impossible for an adversary to somehow beat the real signal which is coming back by generating its own signal. Now, that delay that I talked about, that processing delay, is another potential weakness that the adversary can exploit, right? If the adversary knows that when the signal reaches the other party, then it takes, let's say, a second to come back, then the adversary can deploy a faster hardware and then generate the signal back, right? So again, what we also want to make sure is that there is something the party which is bouncing back does to the signal, because if it literally just reflects the signal, then the adversary can design a faster reflector. So we also want to avoid that, right? So the non-predictability in these multiple senses have to be brought to bear if I want to design a reliable system. So very little delay, non-predictability, in order so that the adversary doesn't have any advantage over the reliable system. It should be physically and logically impossible to for adversary to do. Okay, so so that's our kind of basic challenge out here. So there are various attacks. So again, to kind of summarize this portion, systems which are based on signal strength and systems which are based on phase they are easily beaten. So fundamentally insecure systems that are based on time of flight, a lot of these implementations have issues which adversaries can exploit and have exploited. So to design it properly, one needs to kind of bring some additional stuff out there. So basic idea, and this is something that gets used in other aspects of secure systems, is the concept of challenge response, which is I challenge you and only you can provide the response. Password is an example of that, or those secret questions that websites ask or not. They're all examples of challenge response. So a lot of security protocols use as deep down this notion of one party throwing a challenge and the other party kind of providing a response. So back in 90s, and researchers from Israel, they created this concept of distance bounding. Cryptographic protocols which help you bound the distance. So the basic idea is that the distance bounding protocols can establish an upper bound on the physical distance to the prover key. Okay, so they are basically saying that that through these protocols alone, we are going to have a verifier establish an upper bound on kind of the physical distance that exists. so this is a setting again. So we have a verifier, we have a prover. Verifier is trusted, so that's my car or the ATM machine. Prover is the key. Then the prover is trying to prove that we want to make sure that the prover is close enough. So what we are going to do is we are going to play this protocol will help us say that prover is no more than this distance. So that's the guarantee that we seek to provide, and that's the purpose of this response protocol. And you'll see that it makes use of cryptographic primitives. Okay, so in particular, the goal of this response protocol is that there is no fake prover P prime, which can pretend that it is closer than the actual prover. It can pretend to be farther away, but not closer than it. Now, as we realize, pretending to be farther away can also have consequences, but we are not going to worry about that yet. We are only going to care about that a fake prover, a fake should not be able to pretend that it is closer than. That's our formal problem. Okay. Okay. So what this will let us do then is, if we are able to establish an upper bound, then the verifier basically would know that the valid prover P is within a circle, and then it can provide service to it. Okay, so firstly, one thing that when we look at this problem, one has to be very clear cut about what our model is, what our scenario is. So, as even in your projects and all, very important to very clearly articulate what the attacker model is, what exactly is happening, because any solution you come up with has to be different. So one type of problem is what's called distance. We can't trust the prover itself, right? So we can't simply say verifier says that T1, are you there? And the prover says yes, at T2, because the prover may be lying or something very So the issue out here is the following: how is the verifier measuring the distance? As I talked about earlier, for our outgoing message, an incoming message, let's say we know the turnaround time, that is 0, so we can measure the distance by saying T2 minus T1 is equal to multiplied by T1. So it's the first order model that we saw. Okay. Well, the issue out here is that somehow the attacker can manipulate and introduce this delta, and now I can have the region of a smaller b. So this can happen if, for example, always the question was, are you there? And then the answer is yes. Okay, so I can pretend in different ways. I can just keep sending out a stream of yeses, for example, and tell you that a yes to this, right? So you have to obviously make sure that the yes is in response to what's specific. So what can we do? Okay, I'm going to add a sequence number. Sequence number can be there. So as you can see, somehow there has to be some more to it in order for us to not have a response coming back. P should not be able to send the yes before it actually comes. Right? We want to prevent that situation from happening. So, so how would we do it? Well, one way to do this thing is imagine it. P1, method 1, we introduce a nonce, which we talked about before. What were the nonce? Random number, right? So choose a random number, and the random number has to be included in the response. So we are doing that job correctly. Cannot be guessed, so it can't. So I know that this message coming in is in response to right? Random number, so we can't do that. Can this be a pattern? Yeah. So it cannot. So firstly, obviously, it cannot be attacked by this guy, right? I mean, it can't. If it has received the message and it can't divine the next number, put it in the simulator, then we can't set it back. But with the assist with some other attacker, potentially I could do that. So the idea now would be that maybe this prover has some other party in the hood, right? So right here. So this is called mafia fraud. Gang trying to attack the service. So so this can send. Now under what conditions is it valid? Well, firstly, if A can listen to this, to do it, or if the signal is traveling slowly, particularly if turnaround time or something more, then that is right. So you can imagine situations where this simple thing can be bypassed. So, but randomness does get us in something. So, so this brings up that essentially randomness could be our friend, right? Because it does seem to help help someone. So, so now I can go further. Give me a second. That what we can do is we can say, okay, instead of this thing sending back the random number, it's going to send back a function of the random. And one which only this type of function. Somehow we are going to arrange for that. Now, even in this, there is still that issue of the delay. In this, we can cause us problems. So, so what we really have then overall is the following: that our distance measurement is being done using something like this. There is P2, P1, there is a turnaround time, and that's how the distance is calculated. And this turnaround time is going to be normal, right? I mean, if it is, let's say, a particular manufacturer's radio device and all, then not a secret, it's kind of known what the turnaround time is. So, a malicious prover can basically cheat by this amount that exists. So the issue out here is the following. Let's say we come up with a standard and because at some point in time we decided that the turnaround time is going to be this much, and so we design the system around that. But then the prover, once it gets access to a faster technology, will basically be able to lie around how it is, because it can actually play, have this method to work. So what this means is that if baked into the protocol, baked into the standard, there is some assumption about what delta T is, and we design the whole system for that, or any improvements in delta T basically open up to an attack which could be made use of by that person. And just in terms of that, what these turnaround numbers are, so apparently these car keys and all, they are in tens of milliseconds, okay, because they want to make sure that they keep these things. And a millisecond will be equivalent to miles, okay. So any laxity like this opens the system up to a lot of distance manipulation. So this delay is presents a challenge also. So back to one of the original distance bounding protocol is something called the branch bound protocol. So and it basically sought to address provide based upon it, since a lot of work has happened and some of these UWB barely existed at the time and all, so this work was done purely in the abstract. But since then, the marriage between this and the actual technologies and all have come into play to now have systems which are provably secure against reduction. So the way this thing works is the following. Again, I have the verifier, I have the prover. Verifier has a public key. So prover is the key of the card. This is the card. In this case, you can imagine that the dealer, when it pairs the system, basically creates somehow that key pair is created, and the secret key is the card. Particularly the secret key is the key prover, and the public key, if it's an ATM card or some other thing, something similar. So the first step which happens is the following. Before I go into it, so often like in these kind of situations where I have to prove to you that I didn't lie, like I mean, let's say we are playing a game, I'm supposed to guess a number, and my number is larger than or smaller than yours, then you're going to win or lose. So usually what happens is again, we commit, we take the number and sort of write it on a piece of paper and put it in the folder so that I cannot change my mind. Right? So it's the commitment notion that's said, which is so that it prevents people. Something similar happens over here. The prover is going to pick him and is going to commit him. So what commitment basically means is that it's and I should not be so think of it like we put it in an envelope and we sign it. Okay, and the idea is that therefore it's a proof that the prover put it there, and it's also something we can multiply about. And then so a protocol which goes along the following lines. The verifier, that's our car or machine, is going to pick C sub I. Okay? And so these are different bits for challenge. Okay? So you can pick the CI, so we'll send the CI out here, then this guy is going to XOR it with the M sub I, which is previously committed. Right? And then it's going to send back the response. And we are going to do this measurement, challenge response for each one of the 10 bits, and for each one of them, we are going to measure the time. So the idea is to make multiple measurements. So as you can see, that since the M was already committed, in this case knows the N, it can take the RI, XOR it with MI, and get back the challenge for the second. clearly the prover can no longer change its mind. Moreover, it cannot send the response in advance because it doesn't know the CR. Right? So we are simultaneously addressing kind of the issues that we have faced. We want R sub I to be something that cannot be computed before C sub I can, and at the same time, so we are kind of feeling that properly brought to this and prover to come. Okay, and then after that there is sort of a verification phase which goes on. So so basically this tail end basically helps me verify and then I have bunch of measurements out there, and I'm going to pick the smallest of the lot because this is in the original paper what they had talked about was that the processing delays out there could be available. So I'm going to pick the smallest out there to place the bound. So sometimes because it's a processor, it might take very more time for it to be. So that's kind of the basic idea in that original paper. What's playing out here is the measurement which is happening. We are doing the minimum atrocities to take into account variations that might be happening, and then this whole commitment plus or minus number select it out here so that we can verify that prover cannot send something. There's no predictability. The rest of the stuff is just verified we are talking about. Okay, so that's the distance bounding thing. It in turn it is depending upon various crypto functions. There are some of these things like signing and encoding and all that it depends upon are quite slow. The main thing is that the XOR equalizer can be done pretty fast. Right? So this delay that we are talking about out here, when it has to turn it around, can be done pretty rapidly. And in fact, in some cases it can be done right at the log. So you're coming in, and you're literally the antenna simply doing some function without you having to go back to the digital. Right in the analog signal, you can do the operations. So the latest sort of variants on these schemes essentially rely on that the necessary operation which is actually happening during the time measurement phase can be done pretty rapidly, so that we drive down that delay, turnaround delay, which is what gives attack. So predictability and delay, these were kind of the two problems. And so predictability we are addressing by the crypto mechanism, and the delay we address by having this very simple function which can be done very rapidly. Okay, let's see. Let's skip some of these things. So under this umbrella, there are many different schemes that, many different attack scenarios that sort of exist in kind of different papers and all like that. So distance fraud, mafia fraud, and something called terrorist fraud. So malicious prover helps in hydrophily improve that these close verifier. So this is one impersonation fraud, and then distance fraud. So there are a whole bunch of these models that have emerged, and again, kind of most of them are for academic interest. The one which has been exploited the most is indeed, as I said, so pretending to be close to something valuable to gain that service, and the attacks on cars have been kind of the most dominant one. So to kind of summarize part. This is an example, these attacks are an example of attacking some physical property. There is another closed analog out here is when instead of distance, you try to fool time. So if we can give a computer an illusion of an incorrect time, okay, then again that things can be done. So for example, let's say there are systems now where at a certain time of the day the lock will unlock automatically because you expect someone to come in. Okay, so if you can fool the system version of time, they again get attacked kind of in a similar manner where the attacker can intercept the packet and add a delay to it. The solutions again kind of look similar. So secure timing and secure distancing, secure distancing and secure location, they are kind of problems that are plugged together. So the latest, so I think the end story of all of this thing is kind of interesting, which is after many years of kind of denials and stuff like that, finally the car keys begin to use all these things that we talked about. So NXT chip company makes chips around the thing and using ultra wideband radios and different secure responding protocols, and all of that is now getting deployed in Volkswagen. So kind of after almost 2 decades of research and kind of solutions getting refined, now so I guess with this couple of minutes stop there. But it's been an interesting kind of area where kind of physics comes into play with crypto protocols. There is another thing which just how secure locationing gets done. So just want to close with that. So I said locationing is about measuring distance with multiple entities and then combining those distances. So let's imagine in this room there were 3 base stations someplace, and to find the location I'm going to measure the distance to all 3 and compute the distance. So if we have secure ranging, then what I have allowed is that a prover cannot reduce the distance, right? I cannot, it cannot pretend to be closer than what it is. And if you think about it, with respect to 3 anchors, 3 base stations, we will have the triangle inequality already fulfilled. So what I mean by that is that I cannot simultaneously, so I can lie about, I can increase my distance, right? So now if you think about it, if there are 3 base stations and I'm trying to lie about my location, I can pretend that I am farther away than I truly am from one base station. I can even do it with 2 base stations simultaneously. But I cannot do it with 3 base stations simultaneously if I am within this group, right? Because if I'm outside, then I can, right? So if I'm within the convex hull of the base stations, then I cannot simultaneously lie to all of them. So mathematics also comes to you with this. So secure locationing builds around secure distancing, and coupled with the fact that I cannot simultaneously lie and get away with it. So it's that combination that leads to secure location. We kind of build upon these things to create more secure physical systems. Okay, so that's all I have. We'll talk on Thursday.